that a lot, week after week. Thank you for remaining standing for the gospel reading, which is Luke chapter 20, verses 27 through 38. Some Sadducees, those who say there was no resurrection, came to him being Jesus, and asked Jesus a question. They said, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, and a man shall marry the widow and raise up the children for his brother." Now, let's say there were 7 brothers, and the first married the woman and then died childless, and then the second and then the third married her, and so in the same way, all 7 died childless, and finally the woman also died. In the resurrection, Jesus, therefore, whose wife will be, the wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to the Sadducees, "Those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels and are children of God, and being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead were raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, and where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. And now he is God, not of the dead, but of the living. For to him all of them are alive." You may be seated.
Give me a minute to do that.
I'll be right there. So I need you to take a moment to look at the sermon title. Thanks, Rich. And the scriptures this morning. Because I'm going to make an argument that we all have had to stand firm in our life at one time or another. And I want to know, how do you stand firm? And I want to know how Job stands firm, and I want to know how Paul stood firm, and I sure want to know how Jesus stands firm. But let's take our little bird walk here to things in our world that stand firm. Maybe you can attach your thinking to this. Maybe you might want to think of a time when you had to stand firm, when you had to be solid, stoic. As the waves crashing up, you had to be a beacon of light. You had to be a lighthouse for yourself and others. Next slide. Maybe you found yourself in a storm where it felt like the winds had come to push you over and destroy you, but in reality, as you stood firm, the wind was there to exercise you, to get you stronger. Or maybe in your life you felt like this: alone, the only, the powerful, the seedling, the isolated. That little plant is standing firm. Next slide. Whether you love him or hate him, because apparently there's been a ton that came out that he was not a very kind scientist. This man, this Thomas Edison, we credit 10,000 times he tested the light bulb. There's a lot of research that suggests that he had a lot of other people testing it for him, or he was the first one to claim it. No internet back then, how would you know? But the reality is that it took 10,000 times for us to have the light bulb. Cut from the high school basketball team, the GOAT, my opinion, not biblical, but the GOAT, Michael Jordan. Seen here, battling against all odds. If you read anything about him and his relationship with his legendary coach, Phil Jackson, who I have a ton of respect for both of them, but they stayed in their lanes and they had very different opinions of what success looked like and how they were going to get there. They both had to stand firm. And Malala, defying the Taliban assassination attempt and becoming a beacon of peace for women's rights worldwide. I bet at some point they all felt like the lighthouse, the blustering tree, or that seedling in the concrete. I would argue that you could put your face in there. That there are stories that maybe people don't know about. There's times in your life where it was just you and the Lord, knowing how hard it was to stand firm. How often have you had this moment in your life? And the only person that knew about it was God. What levels of perseverance have you had to exercise as a Christian in your faith, in your relationships, in your professional calling, in your life purpose, in your health and well-being? How often have you had to dig deep to overcome, to stand firm? Well, and it's time to share. Like Job, like Paul, like Jesus, let's look at their wisdom of standing firm. To the Old Testament. This, you can leave it. This is Job. Artist rendition, sculpture of Job. What spoke to me about it was the exterior source also was interior to his body. Job faced immense hardship, including the loss of his children, all of his possessions. He lost his wealth, his profession, his income. He suffered from severe pain, physically, emotionally. He was covered in boils from head to foot. Throughout his ordeal, he was abandoned by social circles and endured harsh accusations from his 3 friends and rebuke from his wife, who suggested he must have committed some sin to deserve this level of suffering. Job knew loss and afflictions. And Job teaches us that suffering isn't always the punishment of sin. That God uses suffering to teach us, like to teach the tree, about how strong we can be to stand firm. He uses suffering not because he's cruel or mean, but the opposite. He loves us. And he desires for us to grow and mature. How do I know how Job stood firm? He says it in this morning's scripture. He says, "For I know my Redeemer lives." And that at the last he will stand upon the earth, and after my skin has been thus destroyed, then my flesh shall be seen, will see God. A resurrection will happen, whom I shall see on my side, and my eyes shall behold one another. Pretty high praise from a man who endured suffering. Next slide. It made me wonder, hey, Paul, how do you know how to stand firm? Verse 15. So then, brothers and sisters, stand firm and hold fast. To what? What should we do, Paul? What are we going to stand firm and hold fast to? To the teachings we passed on to you, whether by word of mouth or by letter. See, Paul knew suffering as well. Paul faced beatings, stonings, shipwrecks, persecution, and threats from both the Jews and the Gentiles. He wasn't really loved by everybody. He faced imprisonment. He faced challenges with the church and false apostles. There were internal divisions to what he was building on behalf of Jesus and different interpretations of the law. There was an academic battle. He was not just facing it in the physical, the way Job's story goes. He was processing his walk in culture, in society. How do I play this out? How do I be a human and a follower of Christ? He also dealt with the emotional and the spiritual burdens, such as anxiety for the church, false friends, and of course, his personal, unknown thorn in his flesh that God would not remove. Paul knew losses and affliction, and Paul used the word, the pen, and the speech. To Jesus, hey Jesus, how do you know how to stand firm in all your divinity and all your humanity? Jesus also knew suffering, public rejection, betrayal by his disciples, persecution from religious and political authorities. He also endured immense physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual stress, especially at the moments leading up to the crucifixion. He faced mental anguish, physical abuse, and the agony of being separated from God. He also grappled with social and political realities of his time, such as conquered land and despised people. And the challenges of his ministry included public mockery and the need to refute false teachings. This text in Luke, the gospel, the bulletin that's in your hand right now, is a beautiful example that the Sadducees, who were asking about the law, Jesus, we have all these rules, we have all these laws, we live on earth. What do you say about this? And what do you say about that? And here's this riddle, and here's this trick question. And they wanted to know how the law would allow them to survive on earth. But Jesus elevated. He elevated the question in Luke and says it's not about who marries who. It's not about that. It's about that all who believe will be resurrected and live and never die. You and I have so much in common with Jesus' humanity, with Paul, with Job. And they knew losses and suffering. Jesus himself knew the most. Jesus himself used himself on the cross to save us from ourselves in our life of sin. Why? To provide hope. To provide hope that in our loving, our leading, our writing, our speaking, our enduring, there is hope in Jesus. In closing, in the rock of the lighthouse, there is strength. In the roots of the tree, there is life. In the new life in the concrete, there is great potential. In the constant search for a solution, there is breakthrough. In the persistence in the face of those who reject you, there is victory. And in the perseverance against oppression, there is peace. How do you stand firm? I pray it's with Jesus every step of the way. Selah.